Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the wild, weird, and wacky world of the Word. You know, when you get into things that you can't quite understand because this just seems so strange, and why is this in the Bible? And what? I didn't know that was in the Bible. Well, all right, all that kind of good stuff. Well, we have something like that going on with the book of Job that we've been looking at over the past couple of weeks. And when you look at the book of Job as a whole, you see that for the most part, it's poetry. Poetry in motion. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. And see, even my fine feathered friends agree with that. Yeah, a lot of things going on in the book of Job. One of the biggest things is this book causes more scholars to pull out their hair than any other book of the Bible. The book of Job contains something called hapax legomenon. That's just a fancy way of saying words that only occur once in the entire Bible. What? Yeah, there are Hebrew words that occur nowhere else in any other book of the Bible other than the book of Job. It has more of those than you can even imagine. And it's so frustrating trying to figure out exactly what that word means, because we have a hard time finding it in other Hebrew literature that's not in the Bible to try to get a handle on things. That when translators in the 2nd century before Christ decided to translate the Hebrew Bible into Greek, because that's what everybody was speaking and reading right about then was Greek. They formed the Septuagint. They left out about 400 lines from the book of Job. They were just too frustrated. They said, forget it. We're not even going to try. They just skipped those parts they didn't like. So you have that going on with the book of Job. And especially related to what we read this past week for our lesson from the 42nd chapter of Job, what we find is the very first part of Job and the very last part of Job are all written in a prose style. And it's very evident, it is absolutely evident that both those sections were added much, much later, after the original Job was written. The original Job is all the poetry in motion stuff. That's the innards of it. But there was a little bit of a beginning to kind of set the stage that was put there, and then there's this ending. And what really drew attention to the ending that made people go, I don't know about this, is the fact that it ends with this Hollywood type of style ending, and they live happily ever after. Not that all Hollywood movies are like that anymore, but you know, the old ones. Well, friends, that's not what the whole book of Job was about. It just kind of flies in the face of everything we've heard all the way through. And it doesn't make sense. But the big thing that tells us it was a later edition is it's a totally different style of writing, a lot of different vocabulary from what was, and the way things were used within the book itself. Just the fact that God is given his real personal name, Yahweh, at the beginning and at the end, but not in the middle. It's very telling that this is quite different. But what it goes to show is that the scriptures, as they're handed down to us, underwent editing as it was passed on down through the ages. And that doesn't make it a bad thing, but it helps us to understand why sometimes we get a little confused with the stories like, did David really kill Goliath? Because there's a portion of scripture that says it was somebody else that killed Goliath. What's that all about? So you have those different things happening because as the stories are transmitted through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. It gets handed down by oral tradition before it's even written. And then once it's written, don't forget, you just didn't take it into the Xerox machine and make copies and pass it out. No, you wrote it all out by hand. So there's the possibility that mistakes were made, omissions were made, additions were made. There's a lot of editorializing that evidently does go on with our scriptures. And it's not to say it's a bad thing. Sometimes it was done to clarify things that had been handed on from before. So it's all about struggling with this thing called our faith history. And as we struggle with some of those things, in different times and in different places, we come out with different ideas. Well, that was interesting. I just had a hawk fly right in front of me trying to get my chickens. That's why you hear the dogs barking at that hawk, trying to get rid of it. And it's gone. It's gone. So it's not like the hawk is swooping in and stealing scripture from us. Okay, don't get that idea. It's just the fact that as time moves on, so do our scriptures. And so do we today are in that enviable position where we're really trying to pull it all together as we pull it apart. Even though that sounds kind of strange, doesn't it? As we dive into the scriptures and dissect the different parts of it, that's how we try to put it all together again so it makes sense for us living hundreds and in some cases thousands of years after these things were written. Well, God's blessings be with you on this day. Enjoy the book of Job. Even though it has this happy ending that may not have been an original ending, it still has meaning for you and for me this day. God's blessings be with you.